Hello, everyone. We're live. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon. Today we have a webinar on Blue Star Gold Corp. My name is Jacob Willoughby, and I'm a Vice President of Research and Analyst at Red Cloud Securities Incorporated. Joining me remotely today are Grant Ewing, CEO, and Eugene Flood, Technical Advisor of Blue Star Gold. We'll begin today's webinar, as always, with a presentation on the company by Grant and Eugene, followed by a question and answer period. As a reminder, you can type in your questions at any time, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. But before we begin, I'd like to note there may be some forward-looking statements made in this webinar. I would direct listeners to the cautionary notes on page 2 of Blue Star's corporate presentation, which is located on their website. For Red Cloud Securities Incorporated, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. Should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. Also, we note that this webinar does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investing. Company-specific disclosures for Red Cloud are the following. In the last 12 months preceding the date of issuance of the research report recommendation, Red Cloud Securities Incorporated has performed investment banking services and has been retained under a service or advisory agreement by the issuer. And now I'm very happy to introduce you to Grant Ewing, CEO, and Eugene Flood of Blue Star.
Great. Thanks, Jacob, and welcome everyone to the Blue Star Gold Corp presentation. As Jacob mentioned, we'll be utilizing some forward-looking statements today. So I'll start off the presentation with an introduction to the company, go through the management capital structure, a brief summary of our assets, our current resource, and a brief summary of our 2020 exploration program. And then we'll have Eugene Flood, our technical advisor, dig into the technical details a little deeper, talking about some of the work we're doing to update our flood model, our main resource model, and all of the targeting we're doing now to prepare for the next exploration program. And then we'll conclude and open it up for Q&A. So Blue Star Gold is exclusively focused on Nunavut, Canada exploration and development. We've got 2 high-quality assets, the Ulu Gold project that hosts the main flood resource deposit that we have, and the contiguous Hood River property. This is contiguous to the northeast and south of our Ulu lease. The Ulu Gold project has a significant high-grade gold resource, 2.5 million tons grading 7.5 grams per ton gold for 600,000 ounces of measured and indicated resource, and a substantial inferred resource of 250,000 ounces. The flood zone itself has excellent potential for resource expansion, and proximal to this deposit, we see very good potential to make new discovery. And then if we step further afield, our Hood River project to the east and north of the Ulu lease has excellent exploration potential and has only been weekly assessed over the years in terms of drilling and so forth. We just completed a 7,600 meter drill program. This focused on the Ulu and Hood River projects, and this was the first drilling done on this project since we acquired the asset, the Ulu asset, earlier this year. And I think the key takeaways from our presentation today will be that we see significant share price re-rating potential with this company based on the assets we have. We see excellent potential for new discovery and expanding our current resource base. Our management team is listed here. I've got a technical background for the last several years, though I've been managing successful mineral exploration development companies. Peter Kuhn and Warren Robb are 2 seasoned mining engineer and geologists that have extensive experience operating exploration in the north. And Eugene Flood recently joined the company as technical advisor. You'll note by the last name that it's the same name as our main deposit is named. So Eugene's credited with the discovery of our main deposit. He worked with BHP Minerals in the late 1980s and into 1994 or so. And BHP in those days had a large-scale reconnaissance exploration program underway in the north, and Eugene led the team that discovered our flood zone. He was also involved in the discovery of the Doris deposit to the east, now having been developed by TMAC Resources. So we're real fortunate to have Eugene part of the team. Our board of directors is noted here. So we've got 5 members on the board, collectively long experience with public companies. Our lead director is Dr. George Pollard, and he's our largest single shareholder as well, and very supportive in terms of financing the operations of the company. Collectively, the board is very committed to assisting management and move these assets forward through further resource development and then into resource expansion activities. Our capital structure is noted here. So we've got 240 million shares outstanding, just under 20 million market capitalization based on the shares issued. So we see that as an attractive attribute of this company, our low valuation at the moment in the marketplace. Of course, part of my job is increasing the awareness campaign for this company. We're relatively under covered company, an unknown company, as we just acquired this Ulu asset earlier this year. Note also that we've got a number of warrants that are very close to being in the money here, and part of our financing strategy for next year would be exercise of a number of those warrants. Management holds over 1/2 of the equity in the company, so large shareholding by management, and you can see high net worth investors hold another 20%, so a relatively small float in the company. Our key projects are shown on this. So on the plan map, you can see in the green our Hood River concessions, and in the red we have our Ulu lease. So approximately 9,000 hectares of exploration ground on the 2 combined projects. The Ulu lease is an actual federal mining lease, and the green are the Hood River concessions are exploration concessions. On the Ulu lease, we have a permanent infrastructure that includes airstrip, camp, core facilities, and as noted, we have a significant resource on the flood zone, which is at the red star there on the Ulu lease. And what we see is excellent potential for resource expansion, and we'll go through that as we follow through in this presentation. On the Hood River concessions, it's a very early stage project, but we see excellent potential for new discovery there based on a lot of gold showings that are found on this project. This shows a brief ownership history of the main asset, our flood zone. So as mentioned, discovered by BHP back in the 1980 timeframe. Eugene Flood's credited with that. He worked for BHP as a project geologist in those days. BHP drilled off this asset for 4 or 5 years, about 50,000 meters completed, and did the first resource estimates. Then the project was sold to Echo Bay Mines, who at the time operated the Lupin Gold Mine, which is about 100 kilometers south of Ulu. So this was an acquisition by Echo Bay at the time, and then they completed significant infill drilling, an underground development ramp, raises, early 2000s. Echo Bay was then involved in a corporate transaction, and the surviving entity was Kinross Gold. Kinross didn't do any work on this asset and then sold it to Wolfden, who was the last company that really looked at developing this asset prior to Blue Star. And Wolfden took an approach like Echo Bay, but they looked at developing the flood zone on the Ulu lease in conjunction with a VMS deposit called High Lake that's situated about 40 kilometers north of Ulu. Following that work, Wolfden then was acquired by another entity, and you can see there's various transactions that occurred, ending up with Blue Star holding this project today. We're fortunate to have extensive drilling completed on this asset. It's over 100,000 meters of drilling by major companies, BHP, Echo Bay, primarily. As mentioned, we've got an underground ramp, 1.7 kilometers of underground development, and significant infrastructure, including road network, camp shop, and an airstrip. So all in, well over $50 million of expenditures on the project to date. And this slide shows the gold price for the last 30 years. You can see that the lion's share of the work on this asset was done up until about 2004 in a gold price setting that was sub $500 an ounce. So one of the real opportunities for Blue Star here is reactivating this project, further discovery and leading into development in a gold price environment that's substantially higher than when all the work was done previously. And note our resource estimate was completed as well back when gold was about $1,200 an ounce. So our goal now is to update that resource estimate with new inputs over the coming months here. A resource estimate is noted here. As mentioned, done when completed when gold was about $1,200 an ounce. So we'll update the resource with new inputs. We'll review the cutoff grade. There's additional drilling that was never included in this resource. So this we'll look to do in the first half of next year, complete this update. A notable intercept about 100 meters below our M&I blocks is this intercept noted here of 14.9 grams per ton gold over 7.7 meters. So we know we have great depth potential. We have evidence of good grades at depth here. The new zone is a satellite deposit with a small inferred resource. It is open for expansion as well. And importantly, metallurgical test work done on these projects on the flood and the new zones showed very strong gold recoveries using standard metallurgical processes. The gold occurs freely. So this is a key attribute of this project. And just a brief review of what we've done in 2020. So we conducted a 7,600 meter drill program, really the first drill program done in well over a decade on this project. We tested several targets through the Ulu lease and onto the Hood River concessions. Some of the highlight intercepts are noted here, 13 and 12 gram per ton intercepts over greater than 7 meters on the flood zone itself. The new zone, we intercepted 52 grams per ton over 2 meters. And not noted here, but in the North Fold zone to the north of the flood zone, we had some nice intercepts, 13 grams over 2 meters and another intercept of 13.9 grams per ton over 3 meters. So very nice high-grade results, and we anticipate many of those as we continue to develop this asset and explore it further. With that, I'll hand it over to Eugene Flood to look at more of the technical aspects of these projects, some of the resource work we're doing, and some of the real interesting target generation we're doing in preparation for our next drill program.
Thank you, Grant. For the technical portion of the talk, I'll start with the geologic setting and cover the mineralization style, which also includes metamorphic grade, mineralogy, structure, and alteration. Then in some detail, I'll talk about the flood zone resource, including the block model and expansion potential. I'll end up with some summary observations, and then I'll wrap up with the next technical steps planned to advance the project. And we'll mention targeting for this upcoming season. So starting with the location, the Ulu and Hood River properties are located in the High Lake Belt, which is 525 kilometers north of Yellowknife in the Slave Structural Province. And the High Lake Belt is north-south trending. It's 140 kilometers long. It's Archean age. And the project is located in a highly folded sequence of basalt and sediments in the center of the belt. And on the right, we have the flood zone with a yellow star. And we'll be talking about also the new zone, which is about 700 meters north. Northern Fold Nose, which is 5 kilometers north. And to the east, we have the Hood River Concession and also folded sequence. And there's the crown showing. So if we look at the image on the left, you see it's a folded sequence. We have a series of showings. They're typically acicular arsenopyrite and quartz. And these series of showings have a close spatial association with the axial plane of this fold. It's 5 kilometers long. In the core of the fold, which is basalt over sediment, with biotite schist, we have the flood zone. It's about 435 meters long on surface. And we have a series of subparallel zones, including axis, central, east limb. And The new zone is about 700 meters north. It's hosted in Gabbro, and we'll talk more about those in subsequent slides. Do you want to mention some of the mineralization characteristics? The flood zone's hosted in amphibolite grade basalt, and it has features consistent with other amphibolite grade gold deposits, including ductile deformation, arsenopyrite plus pyrrhotite, or mineral assemblage, as well as a calc silicate alteration. And for the flood zone, that is particularly diopsidic hedenbergite plus actinolite plus titanite. It also has features common to, quote, traditional greenstone-hosted organic deposits that would include a high iron host rock, mineralization of a high competency contrast, and the presence of quartz felspar porphyry dikes. So I just wanted, this slide goes through, shows the progressive sequence of alteration and mineralization. I just want to show on the outside, it has a calc silicate alteration envelope, typically 1 to 3 grams. As we move into the zone itself, it becomes more silicified, higher strain zone. The highest grades have crack and seal textures, and at the very highest grades, you have brecciated wall rock fragments of the basalt replaced by fine grained acicular arsenopyrite, and we also have fine visible gold. As I mentioned, it's an amphibolite grade gold deposit. There's several other examples worldwide of these, including Eleanor, Borden, Lupin, and Hemlo. And there's a number of these are multi-million ounce deposits. So some detail on the actual 3D block model for the flood zone. These blocks here are colored by grade. Yellow is 4 to 7 grams. Red is 7 to 11. And the highest grades are greater than 11 grams. So that's dark red. And we have underground development on the deposit. In the upper right on the left image, you can see a decline coming down. And we have, that's down to the minus 155 meter level. So there's access to a high grade thick section of the deposit from existing underground workings. And the image on the right is a perspective, so you can see the flood zone with the blocks, and we have, it's basalt hosted, that's on green on the surface map. And we also have a series of other additional zones, including axis and central, that are open along strike and then down dip. And the new zone is in Gabbro, and that's also open down dip. This is a long section of the flood zone. This is done, it's a gold times thickness, so we're looking at contoured gram meters. And there's a high grade and thick section localized along the sediment volcanic contact, and that's this green line here. So we have underground workings, access to just about the minus 155 meter level. So it's access to this high grade thick section. We have concentrated ounces. Now these, this is the M&I blocks where we have measured in red, indicated in yellow, and blues inferred plus sub-gram form material. So the actual flood zone is in between sediment and gabbro. And we have that same scenario, the same architecture for the axis, central, and east limb. And those haven't been tested at the sediment volcanic contact yet. For the flood zone itself, the original ideas for the explorers were that the plunge was about 45 degrees and the drilling was based on that for deep drilling. But the variography showed that the plunge is actually about minus 60 degrees. And that idea has been very lightly tested. The red here is plus 4 gram drill intercepts. And there's certainly potential for resource expansion below the 500 meter level before the be below our existing M&I blocks. There's a very promising trend here where as the zones get wider, the grades on average are higher. So such that when we get to greater than 10 gram meter wide zones, they average about 15 grams. And a good example of that would be a hole, underground hole at about minus 200 meter level that Echo Bay drilled, and it was 26 grams over 14 meters. And as I mentioned, there's untested potential in these proximal zones, including the central and east limb. They haven't been tested at the sediment volcanic contact, where at the flood zone, that's where it gets thicker and higher grade. So lots of potential here. They have quite long strike lengths. The central zone has a total of about 575 meters strike. It's currently tested well away from the sediment volcanic contact. There's ore grade intercepts there. The east limb, 900 meters of strike in 3 zones. Again, not tested at the contact. There is ore grade in the east limb as well. We have the axis zone, which has only been lightly drill tested. It's ore grade material there. Again, not tested at the sediment volcanic contact. We have other zones, including the west limb at south, which have only received limited drilling, though they do have shown ore grade material. Moving north of the new zone, about 400 meters north of the new zone, we have the zebra zone. It has ore grade material about 8 grams over 2 meters, only 3 drill holes in there. It's in the core of the fold along the axis as we move north. And then 400 to 500 meters north of that, we have the contact zone, which has a very similar architecture to the flood zone in that we have basalt over top of sediment right at the fold axis. And there's a series of ore grade over ore width intercepts, including this 6.6 grams over 1.8 meters at the 140 meter vertical level. So that'll be a target to be for additional drilling to be considered for this next coming season. So in summary, we have a lower amphibolite grade deposit concentrated in these series of zones are concentrated right near the core of this 5-kilometer long Hulu anticline. Higher grades are associated with these acicular arsenopyrite needles. There's an interesting observation by Dave Reese, excellent structural geologist, and he quoted, steep mineral lineations within the high strain zones suggest that the mineralization will have much longer and more continuous vertical extent than the strike length. So that's promising. The flood zone has excellent potential down plunge, and there's several proximal zones that are also open at depth and along strike. And we still have several high-grade surface drawings that remain undrilled. And then just briefly, across east of the flood zone and across this granite apophyse, we have the Hood River Concession and has a series of high-grade surface showings, limited drill testing, and we'll definitely be looking at that as a second priority for targeting. Finally, to wrap it up, moving forward technically, we need to review and update the vein and block model. We'll be redoing the leapfrog geologic solids. We'll be redoing the resource for the flood zone because, as Grant mentioned, there are historic intercepts that were not previously included. And we also have the new Blue Star drilling. We'll also review and update the new zone resource, and we'll generate the first resource for the North Fold nose. And in conjunction with that work, we'll also be getting all the historic work into a GIS environment and migrating that into a 3D environment so that we're able to generate and prioritize drill targets for Ulu and Hood River. And I'll send it back to you, Grant.
Excellent. Thank you, Eugene. Yeah, so just to wrap things up here, some of the upcoming catalysts we see with this company, the balance of the results from our recent drilling program, those will be available December and probably even right through into early part of New Year. We'll update this flood zone resource and the new zone resource over the coming weeks based on all the new data and inputs we have. In addition, we anticipate the initial resource on the North Fold Nose zone based on the data we now have in hand. So that'll be a great catalyst for the company as we go into next year. We're planning a fairly aggressive drill program for next year again. It'll be similar in scale at least to what we did this year, and we'll have a lot of additional work completed on target generation. So that'll be an exciting time for the company. And some of our advantages we see in addition to those milestones, we're in a jurisdiction here that is very stable, of course, Northern Canada. It's a jurisdiction that has a wealth of mineral opportunities, and we've developed strong social license with the various regulators and the Nunavut communities. Our team has a lot of history in the north, and so great relationships there. They're going to be beneficial for us moving forward. Importantly, this resource at the flood zone is a high-grade resource, so it's a great asset for this company. I think really unrecognized in the marketplace, and that's part of our job going forward is enhancing the awareness of this company. On an infrastructure basis, we've got a significant infrastructure here, even though we are situated in the far Arctic. As mentioned, we've got road networks, airstrip, underground development, and substantial drilling database. Our focus is going to remain exclusively on exploring, developing these assets. So a nice clean focus we have here, and we're operating in a gold price environment that is near all-time highs. So I think it's a great opportunity for Blue Star moving forward. And I'll just move on to this slide here. So this is a peer group relative valuation slide. Just a key takeaway here is that on a market capitalization per ounce of gold in the ground, we're in the $30 an ounce range with where we're trading versus the average Canadian peer group, which is double that in the $60 an ounce range. That's based on our issued shares. So I think it shows, that we're cheaply valued in the marketplace, and we've got a high-grade resource with excellent exploration potential. And really, our goal now is to unlock that potential as we move forward. And I'll just wrap it up with one last slide here. This is a proposed all-weather road called the Grays Bay Road, and it would run from the Grays Bay port area in Nunavut all the way to Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. And this road has been planned out. There's funding already received by the federal government of about $20 million. So this has significant support by various Nunavut communities. It's in the environmental review process now. This would really be a game changer for the mineral deposits in Nunavut. There's several of them in addition to what we have here at our Ulu and Hood River projects. And importantly, this road would pass right by our Ulu site, and we're about 100 kilometers from the coastline. So that would be a real advantage for this project and others in the future. And with that, I'll conclude our presentation and hand it over to you, Jacob.
Great, thank you both. That was a lot to digest. We can take a few questions. We'll start with one from a participant here asking about whether you look at any additional assets potentially in the north, realizing that you have your hands full with your current Ulu and Hood River projects, but are there things that you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, we certainly keep an eye on that area within close proximity to our Ulu and Hood River projects, but we really do have multiple target areas to test. So our plate's pretty full right now. And I think that's really where we'll focus mostly the Ulu lease and then on this Hood River concession for the coming months and probably years.
Right. Now, one of the interesting things about your company is you have these these two properties that are contiguous, but at very, very different stages. Ulu having measured and indicated resources, and then Hood kind of being, really just past the sort of prospecting stage. Could you tell us sort of why that is?
Yeah, no, and that's an interesting comment. The Ulu lease and the flood deposit itself received attention from Echo Bay and BHP, and this was mainly because it was really viewed as a development asset for Echo Bay in the time. So after it was purchased by Echo Bay, so their intention was to really drill off a reserve and not focus so much on the exploration potential at that time, and then custom mill it at their Lupin mine operating to the south. So that left us today with a very enviable position of having a well-advanced resource with relatively untouched exploration potential on a lot of the surrounding ground.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions we always get very quickly with stories in the north is about permitting, but because of the past development, especially the decline that was put in by BHP, that would allow you to permit things a lot quicker, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we'd still have to go through the regular permitting process, but we're doing a lot of the baseline work now, the environmental baseline studies, some of the early economic studies to sort of reactivate those. Some economics studies were done by Echo Bay in the past. I believe Echo Bay also had an impact benefits agreement back in the 2000s. So there is historic agreements in place that'll be quite helpful as we advance these projects, Ulu and Hood River.
Mm-hmm. Now, the number of interesting targets that Eugene spoke about, some of the ones that stuck out to me were the sedimentary volcanic contact, which actually hasn't been drilled yet. That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, I'll leave that for Eugene.
Sure. Yeah. No, I was really excited actually to be back. I had certainly plans when I was there, but obviously the focus was drilling a resource, and I was very excited and really happy to be able to see that after all these years, in some respects happy in that I have a second opportunity to actually test some of these additional ones that I've always wanted to put more meterage into, and I think this is we have a model to explain and predict the mineralization, and that model has not yet been applied to these additional targets. And there is, a lot of potentially low-hanging near-surface mineralization, and that's has not yet been tested.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to criticize the previous operators too much. For one thing, gold price was in a completely different range back then, so they were looking at things with a different lens, I guess you could say. But another thing that stuck out was that that central and east limb drilling that looks really exciting as well.
Yes, there's ore grade over ore width, and there's and it's quite long, and that's the collective strike length is sort of more than double than the flood zone itself, which is so. And if you think of sort of how the depth to strike ratio, they should be quite deep, and at the flood zone they tend to get thicker and higher grade at depth. So there is real untested potential for both the central and the axis and east limb, definitely.
Yeah. There's a question here from a participant asking about, of course, another question we get very often, being so far in the north, what are your per meter drill costs? And I know that it's an expensive place to work. So maybe Grant, you could address that one for us.
Yeah, so certainly our per cost per meter are higher than you'd see in southern regions. We're probably in that $500 to $700 per meter at least, I would say, in the last program. We do get economies of scale though, so if we get to the point where we want to go from say 2 rigs to 4 rigs up there, then we're going to achieve some better drilling costs. So and also one other item that potentially happens in the future is we get enough confidence in the resource expansion potential to reopen the decline and perhaps extend that decline, which then would allow us for underground drilling as well.
Well, that would be really, really great, but I imagine that would take a bit of permitting and some time.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the planning that we're doing now is considering those kind of aspects as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. And just a follow up to that from the participant was wondering, do you use mostly Nunavut-based contractors, or some of them from Southern Canada? Yeah,
so most of our contractors are coming from Northwest Territories and Nunavut. This past year, we had issues where we couldn't bring Nunavut residents to our camp based on the COVID business. But our plan going forward, as soon as the availability of the Nunavut workforce is available again, we'd certainly look to bring in as many Nunavut people as we can. And our drill contractor, though, is experienced throughout the north, based out of Yellowknife. We're looking at some various other Nunavut contractors to utilize for the upcoming program.
Mm-hmm. Another question for Eugene, perhaps. It was interesting listening to you talk about the interpretation of the plunge being not quite what was proven out in the data, something more like 60 degrees. Is that going to factor into the angles that you plan on drilling in future holes?
So what needs to be clarified is the actual sediment volcanic contact. I think that's strongly influencing the plunge. So it may not be entirely consistent. It could roll. And so what we need to do, and what we will be doing, we'll be updating the vein model and doing 3D solids for all of the geologic surfaces, and we'll just better understand the deposit, so we'll be able to better drill and target and drill the deposit.
Mm-hmm. And I was also kind of surprised to hear that there are some historic intercepts that were not included in the past resource calculation. Do you know the reason for that? And can they be used in a future resource calculation?
Sure. Yes. So I do know why. The previous ones. So there wasn't actually. Blue Star is actually the first person to create master consolidated databases for the drilling, and previously it had been sort of Excel sheets and things like that. So the first thing actually I did when I started working with Blue Star was initiate this consolidated master database, and we realized that there's holes missing from the resource. And I did speak with previous people who did them, and they were aware, but they had actually finished. The last resource had been wrapped up before these were found. So they actually were aware of them, but they didn't, they had this problem. The work was done. So they actually were aware of them, but it wasn't included. So that is, we'll be able to use those intercepts, and there's some very nice ones. There's, some certainly very nice intercepts to use there, as well as the Blue Star drilling this year to upgrade, to redo the resource.
Right. I think you mentioned an Echo Bay hole that, if I'm not mistaken, was 26 grams over 14 meters or something like that.
That's correct.
Yeah. That's exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's 370 gram meters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great stuff. So there was an earlier question here from a participant, which I think was covered off, but I'll just go back to it so that there's, in case anybody else missed it, but there's about a third of the meterage still to come in assays, and I think, Grant, you were saying that it'll be coming in the next month or so, and perhaps even into January.
Yeah, that's correct. So roughly, I think 40% of the assays still outstanding. Yeah, some holes from the flood zone area, and then some from the Hood River. So those we expect December through January.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that exhausts all the questions we had from participants and that I had. But I want to thank you both for taking the time today to go over this. Has been very informational. I quite enjoyed it. Maybe a little bit heavier on the technical side than some participants would have liked. But a lot of us are technical, and we love to learn more about the assets. So I'll just remind participants that we have our next webinar tomorrow with Barcelli Minerals at 2 p.m., which will be hosted by my coworker, Derek McPherson, and include the president and CEO of the company, Gary Cope, and Steve Cope, who's the Senior Director of Business Development. So thanks again, Eugene and Grant, and everyone, please stay safe.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.